you have to be very clear about what your goal is. You have to stay very focused on achieving your goal and what you need to do to achieve your goal. And then you have to work hard and stay disciplined about doing those things and trust yourself.
Welcome to the Halftime Snacks. My name is Ronena Imbindo. This show explores the intersection between sports, business, and technology. Are you ready? Let's go! I'm delighted to introduce our most accomplished guest of the show yet. Originally from South Africa, is a former field hockey player who competed in the 1996 Summer Olympics. This man has over 25 years of experience working in sports and technology, along with multiple athletes, founders, investors, and organizations. Today, he's the CEO and co-founder of Sports Technology Group, a company looking to disrupt the industry using innovative and groundbreaking technologies. It is an honor to host such an icon of the industry in the Halftime Snacks. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Gary Boddington.
Ronan, thank you. That's an awesome introduction. I don't know if I would classify myself as an icon of the industry, but I'll go with that for now. Thank you.
It's great that you took my invitation to the show, Gary. Thank you so much. I'm super excited to learn from you, and I'm sure the listeners are as well. I'd love to start our chat today by learning about your story as an Olympian. Given that not every day of the week I get to meet Olympians, I'm super curious to ask you about it. More specifically, I want to ask you, what are one or two things that you did in your training that helped you to win today in businesses and in life?
I think, at the risk of sounding cliched, the best way to describe that is actually to use cliches, because I don't think any sports person is different regardless of the sports code or the geography that you come from. And I think I benefited enormously from my sports career in transferring the skills that I learned there into my business career, which has obviously now been decades longer than my original sports career was. But I think, and to go back to those cliches, it's just things like you have to stay focused on your goals, you have to stay disciplined, you have to work hard, you have to have resilience to be able to bounce back. And those elements around becoming a competitive athlete at an international level are exactly the same and completely transferable to the business world. So in the business world, and whether individual sport or team sport, you can look at the principles of being successful in sport as analogous to the principles of being successful in business. So in a business environment, you've got to have a very clear goal for your team. You've got to get the team aligned behind that very clear goal. You've got to have very clear communication so that everybody is aligned, and open channels so that everybody has opportunity to contribute. And then once everybody's aligned and clear about where everybody's going, have you got the right people in the team? Can everybody stay focused? And then once you've got all those elements together, then it's just be disciplined, stay focused, get the hard work done. So I don't think I'm unique in making some of these comments. I listen to a lot of other sports people and listen to a lot of podcasts and a lot of entrepreneurial podcasts, and it's kind of the same thing. So I apologize if that sounds a bit cliche, but I think that's the reality of trying to compete at an international level, whether in sports or business.
That's great, Gary. And what was the last piece of advice your coach said to you before you competed? What is it that you remember?
Well, the coaches, you obviously have different interaction with coaches as you develop through your career. So as a younger guy growing up, developing different aspects of your game, whether technical skills or tactical understanding of games, different things changes. But I think as you mature into the game physically and your technical skills are good and you understand the strategy and tactics behind the game, ultimately, I think at that level, some of the best advice I would get from those coaches at that level was just trust yourself, back yourself. And again, that crosses over to business as well. So, when you're competing at an international level and you've developed over a number of years, and you've developed all the elements of your game and all the attributes physically you need to develop, you then ultimately are competing against people who've done the same thing and have also put in the hard yards and So at the end of the day, you've got to trust yourself and execute as best as you possibly can.
That's fascinating, Gary. Thank you for sharing. I think, considering that one of the things that has changed significantly between 1996 and today is the exponential evolution of technology. I wonder how has that taken its effect in performance and preparation of athletes today. As an example, in one of the articles I wrote in my digital magazine, we explored the science of sports apparel design. It has been proven throughout time that those improvements help athletes to be better, to be faster, and stronger by studying the different physics of the movements and creating better designs to beat the forces that work against the body. So, given your experience, I'm very curious to ask you, how is athletes' performance and preparation different now compared to before?
To be fair, I think there's no comparison compared to where it was before. So, yeah, when I was growing up as a young boy back in South Africa, there used to be seasons allocated to specific sports. So, and as most in South Africa, there's a very warm climate and it's very conducive to sports. So everybody plays a lot of sports. So, in the winter months, I would play hockey and ice hockey. Ironically, I competed for South Africa in ice hockey at an international level as well. But I would play rugby, I would play soccer or football, and those were all kind of considered winter sports. And then in summer, I would play cricket and water polo and tennis, or I'd go surfing. So back in those days, you could do all of those, and that's the one element that has changed. It's not the case anymore because it's not every sport is 12 months of the year now. There's no 6 months of this and 6 months of that. So that's at one level where I think it's changed enormously, and there's it's almost gone full circle because a lot of people are saying now maybe it's not a good idea for a younger athlete just to focus and specialize on one sport. The cross training actually benefits. If you want to compete in one sport, you can learn a lot from other sports if you're doing cross training. But I think you're 100% correct. I mean, I was from the generation where, and probably the last generation, arguably the last generation, maybe second to last, where we would still have a beer in a change room and make friends with guys after a test match or at an international or provincial level, and that's all changed. I mean, all sports, it's much more professional, and a lot of that is driven by the introduction of sports medicine, sports science, and the explosion of wearables. I mean, being able to track data. And I think that's only just begun as well. I think the tracking of data is brilliant at the moment. There's some great vendors out there that produce unbelievable data. I think the challenge at the moment is really being able to aggregate that data and analyze that data and create better outcomes for athletes, right to the point where we're having discussions about being able to benchmark yourself. If you're a young athlete, you should be able to benchmark yourself against some of the top athletes at the moment to say, am I heading in the right direction? Is my bicep the right size? Is my tricep the right size? Is my explosive speed the right metric? And if I'm not heading that way, then I can do the right. There's interventions to get me on the right track. Or if I'm not going the right way, just to acknowledge that I'm actually never going to be a pro athlete. That's potentially a reality that could happen as well. And it gets right down to. I think the nice thing about high performance athletes is you can measure a lot of data, you can get a lot of data, and that actually crosses over to people that aren't high performance athletes. So there's a lot of a healthy, active lifestyle can be driven by a lot of the activities that athletes are doing, and a lot of that can be data driven, right down to, how do you determine the ultimate football player, or the ultimate hockey player, or the ultimate tennis player? There are genomics, and there's a lot of detail out there that you can start to track now, and start to work out how you create your best athlete, or how you coach an athlete to become the best athlete they can be. So there's to answer your question more directly, I don't believe there is a comparison to the way we used to train, but clearly sports are very different nowadays, and it's much better off for it.
Totally, Gary. I'll keep that in mind. That's super interesting. Taking into account your wide experience and knowledge of sports and technology, combining it also with the work and the tech trends you're exposed to consistently, I'm very intrigued to ask you, if I would give you $10 million to invest only on sports technology today, how would you use it and why?
Brilliant. Just when you're ready to write that check, just send it my way. I'm ready for it. I think the first thing I would do is I would start a fund. I'd take your 10 million, start a fund, and put that as the first money in, and I would go to the market and see if I can leverage that initial check. So whether I can go 5x or 10x, try and raise a fund of 50 million or 100 million on that. So that would be my first step. The second step would then really start to look at investing in startup technology, and the space is just exploding. I mean, I spent probably 7 years in the blockchain space. I was very early in that space, and things were going mad there. And I just see the number of people that are coming to the sports sector now is growing fast, and the number of ideas and new startups is growing fast. But what I've seen over the last couple of years as well is there's a lot of sports people that don't understand technology, or there's a lot of technology people that don't understand sports. And that's a sweeping generalization, because there are obviously a lot of people in the middle. But I think that the big opportunity for the sports sector is to create more people that understand both sides, to create the stimulus with investment to allow startups to really give ideas some flight. They're not all going to make it like every other sector, but there's just some unbelievable ideas, and that's really it. I mean, why would I do that? Is around I think we're at a juncture in history which is incredibly exciting. You know, if you look at the sports sector, so if you think of all the modern technology that's out now, there's blockchain technology with smart contracts, and there's cryptocurrency, and the associated wallets, and then there's AI, and there's ML, and there's IoT, and there's AR, and there's VR, and pick an acronym, and they are all coming to sports. If they're not in sport, well, they're all in sports, but they're just not haven't been embraced yet. And then if you overlay that into the challenge in sports around fan engagement and stadium optimization and wearables that we're talking about, and it's such an exciting time. I say to my son often, he's a second year university student, and I say, I wish I was 30 years younger and back where he was, because it's just such an exciting time. And if you look ahead to the LA 2028, if you cast your mind forward and sit in the stadium, we probably don't actually have to be sitting in the stadium. You can sit next to the track using an AR or VR solution. But that's the technology that's going to be around for the Olympic Games in 2028 and Paris in 24, for that matter, is just going to be staggering, and that excites me. So I'd certainly, I'm happy to accept your check, and I would want to invest in helping startups to get going with their ideas. And I'd also put an element of education. I'd like to invest in an education layer, really to help the sector move forward, because part of the challenge is it's not a technology challenge. There's a human challenge of the inability or the lack of education and an unwillingness to embrace digital transformation. And that needs to be addressed. And that's an education thing, nothing else. It's not a technology challenge.
Since you're an expert, I would definitely invest those $10 million if I would have them, but maybe in the future, Gary. But, I think also what's interesting is how the pandemic has accelerated this adoption of the technology inside sports. And I think we're going to see a lot of new innovative technologies very, very soon. I mean, even before we get fans back into the stadiums. So that's going to be worth looking into, Gary. I appreciate your answer. And also, given that you've worked with so many founders and companies, I want to know from your perspective, what's the number one reason for failure in the sports tech ecosystem?
No, I think you're quite right. I mean, what you just alluded to is exactly what's happening. This COVID thing, I mean, as nasty as it is, and as horrific as it has been on humanity, a crazy spin-off for all sectors, not just the sports sector, is that there's been an acceleration of digital transformation. There's been an acceptance that digital technology can actually work. So one of the biggest frustrations for me in the work that I'm doing is actually trying to convince my generation that are actually, in my view, are stifling innovation, because they're not willing to accept that there's better ways. That our generation have been doing things in certain ways for so many years that it's ingrained. So when a new idea comes along, it's the old change management thing. There's nothing different to every other sector. There's change management and a willingness to be open-minded to accept change. And what I often say is, if you're sitting at a boardroom and your people around your table are not changing, or your agenda items are not changing, and there's no discussion around technology, or there's no allocation of budget to technology, you're going to have issues. You're going to get left behind. I don't think it's a failure of the sports ecosystem. It's just it's an evolutionary process. And if there is a startup that fails, it's likely because they haven't been able to get the funding they needed to keep going, or they haven't been able to convince a traditional sports organizations to look at adopting a better solution. So it's again, I think it's more about the lack of education, or the ignorance around what's available or what's possible. And I think if it's just that inability to embrace digital transformation. That's a big contributing factor to the lack of, I wouldn't say the failure, but to the lack of more rapid acceleration in the evolution in the sector. So, yeah, as I said earlier, it's entirely a human challenge. It's not a technology challenge, as we all know. And I'm certainly not going to claim to be a smart technology guy, but I know that the guys that can write smart code, that they can do just unbelievable things with technology nowadays. That is useless unless there's a use case that has been addressed, or pain point that's been addressed, and you've got an executive or a C-level leadership person saying, we are going to change the old way we've done things, and we're going to bring in new ways of doing things.
Yeah, Gary, I totally agree with you. And I think that also the new generation, my generation, are the ones that are bringing, I feel like, this intersection between sports and technology in a more creative way, that, are trying to replace the things in sports that either are broken or should be fixed. As we've seen, for example, in soccer, you have now VAR, and they're already talking about drones, which be referees for the games. So I feel like the youth are the ones bringing the change. And as soon as the youth grows and matures into a more technical level, I feel like that's when we're going to see the hit and the change.
If I can chip in there, I think esports is a good example of that driving, of the demographic that's driving that change. So if you look at esports, that athletes that are the high-end athletes, and athletes are that are the kind of the home athletes, all of them they'll buy a skin for their gun, whatever the game is, let's just call it skin for their gun, using Bitcoin on the Lightning Network. So if you pause for a moment, you think what they've done is they've bought a virtual asset with a virtual currency on a virtual network. And that's reality. That's you will not reverse that. That's unstoppable. It's irreversible. So that demographic is used to that type of experience. And the dichotomy at the moment, or the challenge at the moment for the traditional thinking generation is, okay, well, that person has just gone ahead and done that transaction digitally. But now I want them to open a bank account. I'm going to ask them to come into my branch and come and sit down in a seat and sign a piece of paper. Or I'm going to try and sell them an insurance policy, and I want them to come and see me in my office. And it's just not going to happen. Everything is digitally driven. And I just, that's why I say, to me, it's a generational change that's going on. And I completely agree with you. What's happening is, if you look at sports organizations around the world, even the esports organizations now, a lot of them have common ownership. The billionaires own both traditional and esports organizations now, the bigger ones anyway. But very few, there are a younger generation coming through, but they're not at that level of decision maker. They may be starting to influence the boardroom, but they're not actually the final decision makers. And if it'll be interesting if we could record this and listen to it again in 5 or 10 years' time, because we'll laugh. I think we'll laugh at some of the things we've spoken about, because it'll just be normal. All of this technology will be, blockchain won't be some weird and crazy idea. Cryptocurrency won't be some weird idea. That'll just it's just day-to-day normality. That's how it's gonna roll in 10 years' time.
For sure, Gary. And I'm sure that in 10 years' time, someone's gonna listen to this podcast and he's gonna say, Gary and Ronen predicted it. They knew it. Okay. We should have partnered up with them.
Well, yeah, that's when we get the 10 million check, is it?
That's right. That's exactly right. And Gary, I want to ask you, I'm very curious to know what's your take on entrepreneurship. And so what are 3 or 4 elements that you look for in sports tech entrepreneurs, or entrepreneurs in general, that are good signs that that are, will be successful in their time?
So it's interesting because it almost circles back to right where we started. As I said, as a sports person, there's certain basic things you have to get right if you want to compete at whatever level. It doesn't matter whether you at a school level, at a provincial level, at a national, international level. There's just you have to be very clear about what your goal is. You have to be very clear about, or stay very focused on achieving your goal and what you need to do to achieve your goal. And then you have to work hard and stay disciplined about doing those things. And then, as I said earlier, trust yourself. I'm going through that at the moment, where we're building a platform, and I go in and talk to a lot of people, and people don't understand the capabilities or the possibilities of a digital platform. And 25 years on of being an entrepreneur, I still second guess myself, because people that know sports really well, and they've been doing sports only for 25 years, they say, no, that's not going to work. And I have to keep telling myself or backing myself that I know that's not a case of that my idea won't work. It's just a case of it will work, but there's an education piece we have to get over. It's not to say it'll work straight away out the gate, but there's elements that can be addressed. And I think it's no different to playing sport. You want to get to a certain level, and then you're not selected for a team, or you get an injury and you have a setback, and you just have to have that resilience and get up and go again. And nothing changes. And that's common for any entrepreneur, not a technology entrepreneur. You can be a retail entrepreneur, whatever. I think it's just you have to demonstrate those characteristics of understand where you're going, understand how you're going to get there, stay focused, be resilient, and back yourself. Just keep going and back yourself. And that's the nice part about often. I think if I were presented two resumes of two people who have very similar skill sets, very very similar academic backgrounds, very similar skill set, and have got similar experience in kind of doing whatever particular role is. If one has been a sports person at any level and the other hasn't, my own default is to a sports person, because if you pick a swimmer that's competed at any level, that swimmer knows that they've got to dive in the pool when it's cold at 6 o'clock in the morning, and they've got to do those lengths, and that's the hard work, and that's discipline, and most sports people have developed those kind of characteristics of resilience and dedication. So yeah, I think entrepreneurs are the same whatever sector we're in. It's just it's a slightly different breed.
Yeah, I think what's great about sports that maybe it's underrated in a sense is its capacity to mirror life and other disciplines across life, like business or entrepreneurship or innovation, that are there, but they're not even talked about. It's great to see how there is resilience, as you mentioned, built in sports, and the mentality and the focus that you develop thanks to the sport is then transferred to multiple disciplines. And I love that. And Gary, I think that was so much wisdom and so much to take in and so much to think about. I think that's a great place to wrap today's conversation. I want to really thank you for joining the call, to be on the show. I mean, your insights and your analysis is one of a kind. I mean, your personality as well. I found it super interesting and fascinating. I hope we get the chance to grab some snacks again in the future. But for now, thank you for coming, Gary.
Thank you, Ronan. Great fun. Anytime.
Before you leave, I want to thank you for listening. To hear these or any other halftime snack, check out the full archive on my website, which you can find on the show notes. See you next week.